Hey there, it is Tuesday, which means it's time for another in real life video. This week, we're doing yet another viewer-submitted question, sort of following our big, adventure into the Let's Watch sort of mini-series for Fallout Season 1. Figured we'd get a fair number of these questions that were sent in. And of course, if you want to send in more questions, feel free to do so. It helps if you include a question mark in the question for me to search for it. And, of course, like I always say, if it's too personal or breaks terms of service, obviously I can't answer it and it'll go ignored. Which, isn't really your fault or whatever, but it's just the way it is. Anyway, also apologies. I got, I'm not sure. I think I got bit either by a mosquito or a very convincing, zit or something there right at the corner of my mouth. It's not great. But nonetheless, we're here with another viewer-submitted question. Their username should be somewhere on the screen right about now. Let me bring it up here. Let's see. So, they write in and say, obviously you don't have to share specifics, but it's tax time. Are taxes complicated for YouTubers? I've always wondered, but never see anyone say anything about the topic. Which, fair enough, yeah, it is, unless you go out looking for it specifically, it is totally not very well covered. I'll talk about here what I think I can talk about. I haven't myself super duper looked into what all I can talk about, but I have a rough idea of what certainly I shouldn't veer toward, right? So we'll try to avoid that. Just as well, I'm also struggling a bit with the glare of my light. I don't know, maybe need to get a different position for that? I'm not sure. Really picks up in my glasses there in the corner, making me look like the elusive man or something. But regardless, taxes. Taxes on YouTube are not all too dissimilar from if you are any other type of self-employed individual, especially if you are paid through royalties, right? So if you are like an author or something like that, who you self-publish or something like that, if you're collecting royalties in that way. But even going beyond that, like if you're a private, contractor, like you do like home improvement or something, you have like your own business that you run. It's not all too dissimilar from that, is my understanding. I have several friends and family who do stuff like that, and my understanding is that it is not all too dissimilar. Of course, you have to, at least in the U.S., we're a little bit beyond tax time now. The deadline is come and gone. But hey, we're getting to the question now. Also, I should let me state before we get into too many details. This isn't financial advice. This isn't tax advice or anything. This is just one guy's opinion. Right, don't take this as gospel or anything, right? I'm just sharing what I can. I always hear people say that in front of videos like this, so I'm doing it here. I don't know if that does anything. I don't know if that's like the equivalent of making a Facebook post, like someone's grandma making a Facebook post like, "Oh, Mark Zuckerberg, don't steal my Facebook account. You don't have permission to post as me." Something like that. That might be the equivalent. I don't know. Apologies if it is. But yeah, you pretty much have to report all of your income. You report not only, of course, stuff that you get from, like the major platforms. So like YouTube or Twitch, if you're getting income from them, from Google or Amazon. They send you, usually if you meet a certain threshold of income, they send you a tax form for that. And like I said, it's treated as royalties now, as of like a few years ago, right? So like I said, if you're a published author or something, it's not all too dissimilar from that. But you also do need to report, of course, anything that you get from like tips or donations, as people refer to them as sometimes. This is actually part of the reason, not entirely, part of the reason why I prefer, like you can say whatever you want, but I personally prefer the nomenclature of calling them tips, because when it comes down to taxes and stuff, it's a lot more like that, you know? So like, if you sign up to my Patreon, if you like do a YouTube channel membership or like a super thanks, or you hit me up on Coffee or PayPal or anything like that ever, that is treated as a tip, right? You're not donating to like a charitable cause or whatever. So I prefer to not say donate, even though like, you know, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, I don't know, like an internal sort of function for myself. But obviously if you donate to a YouTuber or a Twitch streamer or something like that, that is not a tax write-off for you as if you donated to like a charitable cause, right? Like if you gave to some sort of research fund or like anything along those degrees, right? Any like activist group. If you donate, that could fall under the realm of like a tax refund, right? At least in the United States, right? You're eligible for like some sort of slight tax write-off or whatever. But like I said, if you give to a YouTuber, it is not that. You cannot. It is very much, like I said, far more in line with, you know, you're getting a table at a restaurant and you're tipping your server. You know, it's a lot more like that, which is, like I said, why I prefer that nomenclature generally. Let's see, what else can we talk about? Oh, if you do sort of, for example, I included tipping via like super thanks or other YouTube sorts of methods. Same goes for Twitch, right? If you sub to someone on Twitch, that actually runs through their own backend, right? So I don't need to tabulate like, oh, so and so many people hit me up with a super thanks this year, thus I need to report that, right? Because that gets run through YouTube and it makes it a little bit easier, right? Whereas, like I said, if you go through another site like Patreon, like Coffee, like PayPal, that is still on you to report. Though I believe if you meet certain like income thresholds on those sites, they're also required by law to also send you various like tax documents as well for you to file. But obviously, if you have a lot of eggs in a lot of different baskets, some of those baskets aren't going to generate enough income to where you do meet that threshold, unless you're doing like absurdly well on every single platform. So you are supposed to, of course, report that of your own volition, right? Let's see, other things. Oh, with regards to sort of tips and donations, you'll notice as well. Now, granted, you can opt to, at least in the United States, right? All of this pertains to the United States tax systems, which, you know, we have loads of issues with lobbying from big companies like the parent company of TurboTax and H&R Block. These tax filing companies absolutely do political lobbying, and it's like horrific. But we are expected to like file our own taxes or pay to have one of these companies that lobby the government to do it for us, which is kind of a nightmarish situation, but it is a reality for a lot of people. Of course, if you're employed by a larger business or whatever, chances are they file a lot of that stuff for you. But like I said, in the case of a YouTuber or a streamer or something like that, you're expected to do a lot of that, right? The onus is more so on you than like if I were employed at the local grocery store or something like that, or a grocery store chain or something along those lines. But as far as write-offs are concerned, there are several that you get, of course, and this is part and parcel why it is, I would say, less risky for someone who does this for work to just like buy a game or buy an in-game microtransaction to show off like on a video or on a stream or something, or buy some DLC that they're going to feature in a video or whatever, right? So, for instance, here's a great example that I can use for my own channel. Obviously, if I had bought Skyrim, that would be a tax write-off for me because I've made, like, a ton of Skyrim videos, right? It's effectively work for me. Now, also, if I bought, which I did, the sort of upgrade from regular, like, Skyrim Special Edition Game of the Year or whatever to the Anniversary Edition, that little upgrade, the DLC purchase, is technically a write-off as well because I did feature it in videos with the intent of, like, you know, this is the main draw of the video or whatever, right? I'm not exactly sure where the, like, distinction line begins and ends, though, but generally speaking, on a personal level, because I don't know, I generally try to play it safe because I don't want to get, like, audited or whatever. As far as other write-offs, obviously, like, various forms of hardware, you get, like, a computer or whatever, you get computer parts, you get peripherals, stuff like that. That's technically a write-off if you're using it for the purposes of sort of like your income stream or whatever, right? Like if I, like this microphone, for instance, under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have bought this microphone for myself, but because I'm using it for my work, right, to generate income, it is a tax write-off. Now, other things like bigger purchases, I forget what it's exactly called. Like if, for instance, I bought an entire computer, like a high-end computer, for streaming rather than like buying parts here and there or anything like that. If I bought the entirety of it and, you know, it's like multiple thousands of dollars or at least over $1,000, generally I believe you have those set as like I said, I forget what the exact term is, but it's a write-off, but it's taken over multiple years or multiple periods of time, right? Because you can also, of course, in the United States at least, you can opt for your taxes to come out, I think, quarterly, right? Which, I don't know, mine isn't quite so complicated, right? Like, it is definitely a bit more complicated, and I do have to devote, like, okay, this is the week where I'm going to at least set aside 1, if not 3 days, to sort of deal with this. You know, I know that I need to devote some time to sort of getting all this done, because I'm not, like, hiring an accountant or whatever, because I don't make that much money to where it's viable to me, for me to be like, oh, I'll hire an accountant to do all of this. You know, I don't have like my own personal accountant or something like that. But in that case, right, you get the write-off sort of, like a diminished amount, but it occurs over multiple taxing periods. As far as write-offs, here's something that I think a lot of folks do not know as viewers. Certainly I didn't know it, when I was just a viewer, right? This could be fun to know. A lot of streamers and YouTubers, streamers especially tend to do this, will do big charity streams, right? Especially around, like I said, either quarterly tax seasons or annual tax seasons, right? And that is because, although for you, the viewer, it is not actually a write-off for you, but it is a write-off for the streamer, right? So an interesting way in which, and I'm hesitant to say, like, I don't want to paint a picture of like, oh, this is sinister, right? This is something sinister that people do. Because no matter what, the charity is being helped. Except in some cases where they're not, right? That's been in the news a little bit, where sometimes they aren't being helped. But generally speaking, in the best case, ideally, the charity is being helped and they don't really care the way in which they're getting the assistance, so long as they're getting it, right? Whether it be from you, the viewer, or from like an aggregate, that being like a streamer or a YouTuber or some other sort of like personality, right? But, like I said, I don't believe that is actually a write-off for you personally, because you are giving the money to the creator, to the personality. So you should be doing this in knowing that your money is also going to not only help out this charity, but is going to help out this creator by way of it being kind of a major tax write-off, depending on how big of a success it is, right? Like I said, this is why you see sort of interesting timings for these sorts of charity events and stuff, right? Wherein, oh, tax season is coming up like next month or so. Thus, you kind of start to see a lot of larger streamers and stuff sort of spin up, oh, this is our annual St. Jude sort of charity stream, which, you know, St. Jude, super, super nice and helpful organization. But it is worth bearing in mind that that money is not a tax write-off for you. You're filtering it through this person who is then, you know, ideally, there is an understanding that they will then donate that money as like a lump sum to the charitable organization, right? And that is their tax write-off, right? So, because because you're self-employed, depending on your state, there is a whole lot of different factors of how much you're taxed as a self-employed, paid through royalties sort of individual, or if you filed as like a business or whatever, or like a limited liability company, I think it is, an LLC, stuff like that. That is also considered like a write-off for them, right? So they have to pay less in taxes because they just did this huge charitable donation just before taxes were due for them, you know? Which, like I said, you could definitely read that as being sinister, but I don't know. I think you could read that. It's probably better to just read it as neutral and see it as like, you know, there are people who take advantage of that and don't ever hand over the money. There are people who don't really care about the organization. But just as well, I think most people, I think, are operating in good faith, right? It's just something to be aware of, that's what's happening there, right? And if you yourself are wanting that sort of tax write-off, then you should probably go about it in a different way. Let's see. Other things. I think if you go on, for instance, there was recently the ESO 10-year event, and although a lot of that was paid for by Bethesda or by ZeniMax as part of their like big 10-year anniversary event, if you are a creator invited to a creator event like that one, and you are posting about it on your various social media platforms, whether that be like Twitter or Instagram, you eventually make like a video or a post or something, you're talking about it, you're sort of discussing your experiences with it. A lot of that trip can be a write-off for you, right? Like I said, obviously this one, they paid for a lot of it on their end. But a lot of that can be a write-off. And of course, when we talk about write-off, we're not talking about like it's effectively free for you, right? More so you get like your taxable income is brought down various degrees. So like you could enter a lower bracket, or you just have to pay lower taxes, right? It's like, you know, they count as business operating expenses, right? So like if you were, okay, for instance, if you made like $20,000 that year, but then you have somehow $5,000 of expenses in all of that to going to various like functions and activities, and you had to buy hardware, you had to buy software, stuff like that. That could bring you down instead, not only decreasing your tax bracket, but then you're only taxed at like a $15,000 point, you know, just as like a rough example. But of course, you do have to make an attempt, right? You do have to make the like good faith sort of, oh, I'm going to talk about this and cover this in a video with the idea of like, this is, you know, this is part and parcel of like, I don't know, my brand, as it were. This is like part of what I'm talking about in the video, right? This is the entertainment or information that I'm delivering to my audience. Stuff like that. As for sponsorships, I'm not exactly sure how sponsorships are sort of classified, because I don't really do them here. But I think if you did, it wouldn't be all too dissimilar from, like I said, this isn't financial advice, by the way. This isn't tax advice. But I think if you did it, it would be similar, or not all too dissimilar, if not identical, to how like reporting tips would be. You know, it's effectively the same thing, I think. Is there anything else, at least that I can talk about? I'm trying to think. I think that's about it, right? It is, like I said, it's definitely a pain in the ass to do. And also your mileage is going to vary depending on your state. Like, I know that you hear about a lot of people moving to like Houston, Texas, I think, or Dallas, Texas. Certain places in Texas, if not the entire state, have it set up to where income tax is super low or completely absent. So the vast majority of the taxes that you pay, if you're like a streamer or a YouTuber, is income tax. Therefore, a lot of these individuals will like move to Texas if they're making like hundreds of thousands of dollars per year on this work, right? Or at the very least, they will run an LLC and base it out of that state or whatever. That way, they don't have to pay income tax in that way, which, of course, you know, figuring out an interesting way to get around that kind of income taxing is also kind of an interesting thing in and of itself, especially, you know, it's not all too dissimilar from, I guess, other lines of work, right? Wherein if you are generating that amount of income, you are going to, a lot of the people in that situation, try to avoid paying taxes. Whereas if you are someone who is a lot smaller time, or even doing it as a hobby, but you're still making like enough money from it to where you need to report it to the government, or else you're screwed. You are less likely to, you know, pick up your entire life and move because it's just not worth it. Thus, you kind of end up paying more so than probably some of these larger folks who are just paying federal taxes rather than state, I would assume. I don't know. Like I said, this isn't financial advice. This isn't tax advice. I don't know if that counts for anything, but hey, hopefully it does. Is there anything else I should talk about? I don't know if there's anything else within this realm that I know of. Right? Like, I'm not super duper well versed in it, but like I said, I have to do it every year. I opt for the yearly one because it's not too much trouble, and I don't know, maybe I'm kind of lazy in that regard. Like, I don't want to think about it every year other than, you know, the sort of usual self-employment situation where it's like, oh, you need to set aside roughly a quarter to a third of your income just in case, right? You need to sort of eyeball how much you're going to need and have that set aside. Is there anything else? I don't think so. Yeah, I think that's it. All right. That'll do it for this week's In Real Life. Sorry, no Fallout revisiting video, because otherwise we would just be spammed with like 3 big ones. But hey, look forward to another one tomorrow, I believe, unless something goes horribly awry. That'll do it. Till next time, please take care of each other.